Unique New York. Unique New York. How now, brown cow?
You gonna do some voice warm-ups too? No.
Smooth.
Podcast. The intro, I might add, was not a mistake. We thought we would leave that in.
Oh, is that the very, very intro?
The very, very start.
The first thing people heard was that madness.
Yeah, was madness, and that was the pre-recording to the start of the show that you're with here.
That was the three of us sitting in this room prepping.
Yeah.
So you think that we just jump into this, but we don't. We even do voice warm-up.
Gallipoli.
We're bringing this to you from a very stormy, dark, wet Scotland.
It's horrendous.
My puppy is up in the office. I'm sure in any second now he's about to cause carnage by probably pulling all the podcast gear off the table. He promised that he was going to be quiet.
Yeah, I'm going to scratch him and hopefully he'll be quiet.
This week you are going to be hearing from the man that you heard at the very start of this, doing his voice warm-up, who is Tyler Sharp, the editor and man behind Modern Huntsman.
You also heard him last week.
Yes, you did.
Introing the podcast.
Absolutely. So that was pretty cool to have him guest intro. This show's primarily going to be about Modern Huntsman, a little bit about Tyler's time in Scotland with us over the last few days, and he's going to give you a rundown of Volume 2 and what they've learned, what to expect going forward, and all the kind of grand plans of the Modern Huntsman team.
He'll be glad he's not here this week. It is terrible.
Well, he had a pretty shitty week last week. The weather was terrible when he was here.
I'd say it's worse this week than it was last week.
So it was great to have him over in Scotland again. A pleasure to take him out on the hill, share Thanksgiving with him, and his lovely lady as well, who you will be hearing from in a future podcast.
And he came to the rugby with us.
He
Not the best of games, but it was still a good experience.
Scotland won, so that was a bonus.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll say anything more about this podcast.
No, don't need to.
No. But if you don't know about Modern Huntsman, there's at least one other podcast on it from before Modern Huntsman even really existed in the form that it exists now. Tyler and Brad came on the podcast during the Kickstarter phase of the publication. So you can go back and check that one out if you haven't listened to it already. And if you want to if you're enticed by what you hear and you haven't seen Modern Huntsman, go and jump on to our website if you're in the UK or Europe, and you'll be able to order Volume 1, and Volume 2 should be here shortly.
And if you are wondering where your copy is, Tyler does explain at the very start of this podcast. So hopefully it will clear everything up.
It's in the high seas right now.
Yeah,
hopefully not in
hopefully not in the sea.
Hopefully not. Hopefully on the high seas, nice and dry on the pallet that it's coming in. We have two competition results to announce on this podcast because we let one run on. It was probably the funnest competition I think that we've ever run.
We're going to do another one like it as well.
We wanted funny pictures of your dogs, and it was unbelievable the amount that you sent in.
My phone, because I was screened because people were entering through Instagram and Facebook, and on Instagram often the pictures disappear, so I was screenshotting them all. And I must have had over 300 pictures of people's dogs on my phone at one point. But
we have a winner. We selected our sort of top 6.
Yep.
Stuck it up on social and let you all decide.
Yep.
And the winner was a spaniel, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not
shaking
sure.
Spaniel.
Yeah, it was a shaking spaniel.
And the owner of that spaniel is Andrew Taylor.
Congratulations. There were loads of votes on Facebook and Instagram. And congratulations. And all the top 6 will receive podcast stickers. So if you were in the top 6, please contact us for your podcast sticker. Because, that's the best way.
That is the best way. Just shoot us an email, contact us on social. We will we'll probably we'll tag Andrew in the post that it was originally on, and he will get his CZ doormat as soon as he sends over the details.
Yep.
The second competition, which we're going to announce, was the chance to win the latest edition of the Hornady Reloading Manual, and we asked you to subscribe to the website. And what we're going to do is we're going to send out our very first email shout out in probably a year with the winner on it.
So if you're a new subscriber or an old subscriber, you'll get it. So yeah, first one in a year. We don't spam people.
No.
But we're also, in that shout out, we're going to put up things that are happening at Christmas. We're bringing out prints very shortly, so people will be able to buy some prints. We've never ever sold any of our work before.
So we've got some limited edition prints of some photography that we do.
Yep.
We'll give you the latest stuff on our shop.
Yep.
And some films that we've released recently, just in case you missed them. It's all going to be good stuff in the lead up to Christmas.
Yeah.
Things to entertain yourself with. We might even highlight some of the sort of top podcasts in the last year as well, just in case you missed any. So thank you very much for all the subscribers. You'll find out if you were the lucky winner in the next few days.
Is there another competition?
Well, now we have the actual competition for this show, which is going to be the chance to win a Reloading with Rosie Hornady coffee mug.
Yep. Highly sought after.
We did, and I don't know what, but we've got quite a lot of CZ Firearms merch, like T-shirts and stickers and stuff like that. So I'm going to go through the boxes, and I'm also going to bundle some of that together,
other stuff in,
to chuck in with the mug.
Sounds like a plan.
And how are we gonna run this?
Ooh,
what do people have to do?
This is a tough one. I think you just for this one you just need to throw your ring in the hat. So we'll put up a picture, and you just need to
share or tag a friend or something like
comment
that.
below probably.
So go make sure, if you're not following us on Instagram, you go and do that, Pace_Brothers, or on Facebook, because that'll be the easiest way for you to enter this when you see the post go up.
If you're not on any social media, just send us an email and we'll put your name into the draw anyway.
And
we've got one more competition.
We do.
We've got competitions coming out of our ears.
We mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and that was the very nice PR lady for Ed Stafford said to us that she would send out a free book for our podcast listeners.
Sorry, only UK listeners.
Yes, I'm sorry, because I know there are a lot of you around the world, but that is the criteria for this. It's the first time we've ever done that, actually, where we've limited it geographically.
Time ever, so.
But the book is by Ed Stafford. It's underneath my...
Adventures for a Lifetime.
It is. Adventures for a Lifetime. We had Ed Stafford on a couple of shows ago.
Yeah.
So go and, if you missed that for whatever reason, go and check it out, because it was a great podcast. Fantastic for him to put some time aside to speak to us. And the book that we talk about in that podcast, you now have a chance to win. And
I've already thought about it.
Yeah, you have, haven't you?
It's all simple. We'll put up a picture of the book online on Facebook and on our Instagram, and all you need to do is comment below about an adventure that you would like to do, something you would like to achieve. It doesn't have to be anything ridiculous, and we'll just pick between us in the office the most interesting one, the one that catches our eye. It literally can be anything you want. It can be, I want to achieve climbing a hill in this area.
It doesn't have to be K2.
No, it doesn't have to be K2 or Everest or anything like that. And give us your reasons why, and we'll explain it all in the post. And we'll probably run this to just before Christmas.
Yeah, I think so.
Hopefully
enough time for us to get the book out.
To get it out before Christmas. Yeah.
And as always, just feel free to email if you don't use social media, and we will throw that into the list of people who enter.
podcast@paceproductionsuk.com. It is also in the description.
And I think that's us for intros before this show.
It is.
With Tyler Sharp.
Enjoy the show. It's I enjoyed re-listening or re-editing this show because obviously I was part of it. But enjoy the show.
Did Tyler mention how people can follow him at the end of this?
I'm not. No, I don't think he does. Actually, I don't think he does.
I think he's Tyler Sharp Photography on Instagram.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
So that's the best place to follow him, because he puts up some epic pictures on there, and of course, Modern Huntsman are on Facebook and Instagram as well. Tyler, welcome back to the Into the Wilderness podcast. Kind of for a third time, because kind of for a fourth time. First time, recording didn't work. Second time, you drank a lot of whiskey, I drank a lot of port, I think, which everybody heard, and then you guest introed the podcast from a week ago.
There was another time, because when the first Modern Huntsman was ever launched, you came on.
Yeah, a year ago.
I forgot about that.
We were trying to figure out how long ago it was we met, and seems like way longer than a year, but it was just 1 year ago.
1 year ago, you and Brad came on.
We were sitting in Brad's truck in North Texas.
Yeah, I remember.
On our way to a meeting for a different photo shoot unrelated to Modern Huntsman because we were still having to take on extra work to keep the lights on. And yeah, we had the phone in the dashboard doing an international Skype call recording on your podcast.
And now you've been to Scotland twice.
Now I've been to Scotland
in
twice.
In last year. That's not bad for someone that we've met on Instagram.
And I'm basically a member of your family now, considering that we've had Thanksgiving together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glad to be back.
No, it's...
I'm sorry about the weather.
You know, I couldn't have come to Scotland and not seen mist and rain, right?
Honestly, I'm not joking. This is the worst weather we've had for the year. But it is this time of year where you get this kind of weather, so it is partially your fault for coming this time of year.
That's okay. You know, not to be... I'm not disappointed. I mean, it was a little rainy yesterday on our hunt, but it looks beautiful. The pictures were amazing.
Atmospheric.
Yeah, very atmospheric.
So, Volume 2 is sitting on your lap. It is there. It's tangible. You can touch it. Now, before we talk a little bit about it, I need you to speak to our podcast listeners who have ordered Volume 2 and they're thinking, well, how the hell does Tyler have a copy in his lap, but mine hasn't arrived on my doorstep yet?
Sure. Well, you know, you got to keep in mind that we printed these in the United States and they were shipped directly to our office in Texas. So a lot of the initial orders that were placed in the United States or people who had ordered them overseas, you know, they were paying pretty high shipping rates. So there might be some people overseas who have them because they ordered them through the Modern Huntsman site, but they probably paid an additional $30 in shipping. So we apologize for you seeming like everyone else has them. I'm sure you've seen stuff on Instagram, and Brad's done a great job of reposting a lot of Instagram stories,
cool
showing people opening
people.
them up and, you know, kind of reading them and sitting next to the fire. But the entire palette of magazines that you guys ordered is currently en route overseas on a boat somewhere. And for some strange reason, they don't provide as accurate of tracking for a ship as they do for an individual package via a shipping courier. So we do know that it's on the way. We don't know the exact arrival date, but hopefully in the next week, hopefully maybe by the time this podcast comes out,
they might have landed
we
here.
should have an exact date, but it should be any day now. And we are hopefully optimistic that it's going to be on time so that everyone gets them before Christmas.
Well, there you go. You've heard it from the editor.
Yeah.
We're not lying to you. It is on its way.
But we do have a backup plan
we do.
if it doesn't come before Christmas. So
For all the pre-orders.
For all the pre-orders. So don't worry.
We're just going to postpone Christmas.
push it back.
Yeah.
Tyler's going to fly back with 2 suitcases full of Modern Huntsman.
Yeah.
Which
with Katie and have Christmas here.
and have Christmas here.
Tyler Claus.
Yeah. Okay, so Volume 2. Volume 1 set the scene.
Yeah.
You talked about that in the last podcast. What was Volume 2, or what is Volume 2 about?
Sure. So Volume 1, we intentionally didn't have a specific theme because we wanted to sort of present a pretty broad spectrum of topics and people and just kind of say, hey, look, this is the direction we're going. This is what we want to discuss. These are the type of people that are going to be involved. And from there, we're going to start to get more specific. So Volume 2 is themed around public land. And so for those of you not in the United States, it might be somewhat of a foreign concept, or at least not a common concept. But in the United States, we have the privilege of having massive amounts. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's millions and millions of acres of public land that we can, as American citizens, and actually, so as American citizens, we own that. Right, and we all kind of share this inheritance of land and the wildlife. People from other countries can come to the United States and hunt on public land as long as you have the right permit, depending on what state you're in. It's your land too. You can access it. And so there's been a lot of situations in the United States where, you know, states have wanted to try to gain control over this land and potentially allow, you know, resource extraction or, you know, oil drilling, or, you know, private landowners want more. So anyways, there's been sort of some conflict and contention over this. And so we thought it was an important time to start to discuss that. And so in the United States, at least, there's a division between the hunting community and what we would coin the outdoor community, right? Hunters and rock climbers, and I'm sorry, there's the hunters and anglers, right?
Yep.
And then on the other side, there's the hikers,
All the other outdoor activities.
more
you can
outdoor
do.
that they would call non-consumptive users,
Okay.
right? So typically there's been kind of a division, right? Well, they don't like each other, and so the purpose of Volume 2 was to kind of say, hey, this is more important. The protecting,
Because they all use it.
yes,
They all use the
yes,
public land as
it's-
an access point.
It's more important that we agree on the fact that this public land is an amazing asset that we need to protect and keep from dwindling, because once it goes private in most cases,
You keep that's it.
it's done. So, and there's various political people with nefarious objectives that might be trying to gain it for their own interest and that kind of thing.
A lot of it's to do with money.
Yeah, yeah, or corporate interest and big energy companies and things like that. And I'm certainly not the expert on that, but I think.
But
that,
you have some experts involved.
yeah, and so that's kind of the role I'm trying to take as a presenter. I'm not going to position. There's some things I feel that I am educated on. The reality of public land is not necessarily my forte, so we're doing our best to find people who are experts on those, and then ideally we're presenting a diverse array of perspectives. So in this book, I would say that probably 65% of the stories are focused on U.S. based conflicts and stories, and the difference between public land and private land, and then how in certain situations private landowners are working in cooperation with state or federal agencies or conservation groups to create wildlife corridors to make sure that, as animals leave Yellowstone National Park and are going onto these large tracts of public or private land, that these landowners are doing what they can to improve that corridor and,
Okay.
and allow for migrations of animals instead of them just running into an area with a massive fence.
So collaborative working between public land and the private land ownership.
Yeah, and so as Charles always coins the term, best and could be better practices. We kind of showcase a variety of those situations, what it means, how it could be better. Some of the people who we think are doing a fantastic job, and then situations of just people who live off the land and live, have public land on their back doorstep, and then we also sort of move into the international situation. What does that look like around the world? What's land access look like in other countries? So, y'all had 2 stories in this issue. One is on Scotland, kind of the reality of land access and ownership in Scotland, and then one in New Zealand, which was about the tar, and we can talk about that more in a little bit. And then we had Argentina, we had Austria and Italy, we had Central Africa, New Zealand, and several others. So we kind of have 3 sections of the book.
So it wasn't just a North American centric.
No.
You did touch other parts of the world, which I think
Yeah.
is great. I know that was always your plan to kind of expand that.
Yeah, I think with each issue we want to expand a little more in region, in diversity of topic, because we know that our audience is increasing in other parts of the world, and UK is a huge readership for us, and so we want to make sure that we're discussing some of these topics that are relevant for you guys.
When you were obviously the Modern Huntsman's got out, and it's mainly got out to the US right now. And have you had any feedback with people about the Scotland article? Because obviously it's a very interesting thing, our land use here compared to the US, our access. Have you discussed with anyone that when you've been back over, or even just when you've talked about it?
Not yet. Honestly, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind. So we released this issue about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's not long, really.
And since then, I've been constant. I directed a film out in Montana, and then we flew back to West Texas, and we were out there, and then we came over here. So I've been traveling a lot the last few weeks, and haven't really had the chance to talk with anyone about it. It seems like the response has been very positive based on what we've seen on our Instagram and online, and the emails we've been
Brad's
getting.
been looking after that for you behind the scenes.
Yeah. And so I put up an Instagram post the other day about one of my pieces. I wrote a piece about a private landowner in Texas who goes to great lengths to, sort of make sure that this wildlife corridor exists and that he's doing what he can to improve the habitat for native species. And I sort of asked a question at the end, hey, what do you guys think? Do you disagree with what I said? Do you, and thanks to the Instagram algorithm, maybe it just didn't reach enough people's feeds because no one really responded. So I haven't really had a chance to engage with people about the specific topics. I know Brad really wants to do a lot of Instagram live stuff. Okay. So I think that when I get back, we're going to try to be a little more active with having discussions with people about the issues and specific stories in general. And that might be something to do with you guys. Maybe we try to do an Instagram live together.
You can now drop in on other people's lives. You can have two people live now.
We could have split screens. Cool. So maybe we should plan something where, I know there's a time zone difference, but maybe we could do something at the same time where we actually discuss with your audience and our audience the Scotland specific or any of those topics.
Yeah. It pulls both audiences.
Exactly. That's really cool. Are you finding it that Instagram is getting a little bit harder to get in front of people recently? We find with certain things, even though it might be an amazing picture, it just doesn't reach people.
So for the Modern Huntsman Instagram, no, because Brad is a wizard and he's constantly on it and he's constantly posting and he's very, very active and he responds to a lot of comments. So I think that plays into the engagement and how many people see it. He's also doing a lot of active promotion and running campaigns. Yeah. So I think that Instagram is much more, it's a better example. My personal Instagram, I'm terrible at staying consistent about responding to comments. I'm terrible at checking direct messages. So I think that might have something to do with it. I know you guys are much more active than I am on that, but
that's all Daryl.
I don't know how, it doesn't seem like there's a system anymore. It's kind of a guessing game. I think the bottom line is they want you on it more. So the more you're on it and, your face glued to the Instagram screen, maybe they reward you for that.
But I don't know. But I don't know, because it's a strange one, because you say they want you on it more, but then they've introduced the things like, see, if you're scrolling through your feed, it then now comes up saying you're now up to date. Stop looking.
I've never reached that point.
Yeah. So it's a strange one, because they've been talking about. Zuckerberg himself came out a few weeks ago and said people need to spend more time with their families, less time on Facebook. They want Facebook to be more of a quality experience over quantity. That's what they were saying. So it's funny that he's saying that, but
you're getting a personal message, Daryl, go talk to your wife.
Yeah. And now the phones, all the updates on iPhones all come up with your stats every week. It says you're up from last week on social media, you're down from last week, to make you more aware.
Kind of scary, actually.
Yeah.
If you look at it. And they'll time out apps as well.
Yeah, you can put restrictions of hours on it.
Yeah.
But I try and keep it only now during the working day.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's too much.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's good to separate responsibilities, and I'm much more focused on the long-term vision and the editorial of the magazine and the message that we're kind of putting out into the world, and Brad's much more focused on the marketing and the digital side, and he's really, really good at it, and you have to like it to be good at it. I only use social media on my website because you have to, right? And I don't spend a lot of time on it, so I'm trying to get better, and Katie's been really good about helping me find a formula that works. Maybe that's a scheduled time where, okay, at this time I'm going to spend an hour going through that and responding to comments or putting content on there. Haven't been great at being consistent yet, but I think that it's amazing to see when you put something out there. I mean, the New Zealand film that you guys produced that we helped release was a great example of something that was the most interactive piece of content we've ever put out. And I don't know if you guys checked how many views it had at this point, but it's quite
I haven't recently. I know within like 3 days it had about 50,000.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, 3 days
right?
after
So
release.
when you think about something that's important, and
I'm going to check now while we talk.
And you think about something that you actually want to get out there, and maybe that's something that Brad could come on and talk to you guys later about what you can do to ensure that it gets in front of the people that you want it to. So I don't know what he did, but
there was a lot of things that kind of came together for that. So like you said, the story's in Volume 2, but the film release was before Volume 2 was actually printed.
Yeah.
Because it tied in with the massive issue of the tar cull in New Zealand, which we have actually talked about on the podcast before, right in the middle of when that was happening, when potentially they were going to be culling the vast majority of their population. And just by pure luck, I had been writing a story and making a film 3 months before without ever knowing that the government was going to make that decision. So there was a little bit of, I can't claim forward planning credit for that. It's on the Modern Huntsman page.
I can't. Yeah, I know, but it's on their Facebook. But I can't actually see how many views it's had. But
we can follow.
It's had almost 1,000 people share it. So.
Yeah, we can follow up with Brad, and it was funny because you're normally quite relaxed with your emails, and when I got the email about the New Zealand thing, it kind of had this red alert feel. You were like, urgent. The New Zealand government just announced this. We really need to think about releasing this film in a timely manner. And
well, it was a terrible time for me to be bothering you because your whole team was just up to your eyeballs in finishing the editing and putting together Volume 2. So I always try and avoid trying to bother you during that period of time because I know how stressful it is. But then this was such a time-sensitive issue. They only gave the people like 12 days, I think, before they were going to implement the cull, and we were already 5 or 6 days into that time frame when I sent that email, and the film was, I kind of rushed to dedicate the time to finish it. So we need to get this out now for it to potentially help to make a difference.
Sure.
And but anyway, we did turn it around, and you guys came back, and we got it up on the Modern Huntsman Facebook page. And
I want to make a correction there. You said when my whole team was working on the issue.
Your whole team, you and Katie.
It's basically
your team of you guys and Brad.
Yeah, and Charles Post was a big help in this issue in particular. The official term we've coined is ecology editor because a lot of the lens he's viewing things from is his ecological background. So he helped me much more in the beginning with the curation of the individuals and the direction of the stories, and he helped with some of the editing. But I did the majority of the proofreading and the editing and that sort of thing. We had a professional proofreader. And then, once I kind of got things to a decent spot, we just ran out of time. I mean, at a certain point, you got to take the cake out of the oven, and that's when we passed it to Katie, and then she takes it from there. And I know that you guys are going to get to talk to her later, which I'm really excited about. She's kind of been the quiet face behind this amazing
She's sitting
magazine.
in the room while we're recording this podcast.
Yeah.
Listening in.
Over there smiling. So, I think that it's going to be really interesting for everyone to hear about her philosophy and her objectives solely from a design standpoint, not having anything to do with hunting or conservation, but just from design. And I think that I don't want to speak too much about it because I want to let her talk about it. But I think a common theme with Modern Huntsman is we are trying to do something, one, that no one's ever done, two, that is consistently innovative and challenging, and we are trying to push into new territory that ideally is going to help elevate everybody's perspective on this and the way they think about it, the way they conduct themselves, the photography they're taking, the questions they're asking, whether they're a hunter or not, and trying to, through a long-term chess game, completely blur or eradicate the lines between the hunting and the outdoor communities. That this should be that's just one more division in this world. That do we really need that? Right or left, or red or blue, or north or south, whatever. I mean, that's just, we need to be moving more towards common ground instead of division. And so I think that with each issue, she's trying to do something new. And sure, we're drawing inspiration from from certain areas that she'll talk more about, but I think that really we want to do something that is pushing the envelope across the board. And I feel like we've been pretty successful so far. How long we'll be able to do that is, to be determined, but I think that that's our goal, is to try to do something fresh and new and thought-provoking. So
give us a kind of sample of what's inside Volume 2. You've got it on your lap. Obviously, we're not going to talk about every article in there, but they're, just a flavor for people who haven't got their hands on it yet or haven't actually ordered it, and you do need to do it because I was, as we've said before in here, I was blown away with Volume 1, even though we had had a lot more discussions with you guys, so we knew kind of what to expect, and then it arrived, and I was like, wow, you delivered.
Yeah.
And more. And I've just seen Volume 2 in our hands in the last 2 days, and I just said to you, it's just incredible. So, if you like Volume 1, Volume 2 is most definitely more impressive.
Yeah.
And that doesn't take anything away from Volume 1, it's just that you've raised the game.
And, like you said before, has some more relevant stuff to people over here. So, I mean, if you did like Volume 1, then you're going to like it even more because it has stuff about your doorstep in the UK and New Zealand.
I don't want to call it a reckless blindness in trying to, achieve these goals, but I remember having a conversation with Simon Roosevelt, who amazingly agreed to be our official conservation advisor moving forward. So he's in the masthead, and he's been an advisor for me throughout this whole process. And I remember talking to him before we started to put this issue together about what I wanted to do and the issues I wanted to tackle and the point we were trying to make. And especially in situations where I made a case in one of my stories for how private landowners can contribute to conservation, or in how certain cases they're actually more dedicated conservationists because they understand what it takes to manage land because they own land, versus somebody who is just a public land user who doesn't own any land. They just use the land for recreation.
Without necessarily managing it.
Yeah. And he was like, wow, that's a tall order. He's like, I don't know how you're going to do that. And it seems like something that I'm not really sure how you're going to do that. I said, well, I appreciate that. I'm going to try to do it anyways. And I feel like, he messaged us the other day and he said that he, was really impressed with what he saw so far. He's looking forward to digging into the issues. I feel like we've accomplished our goal. I think of course, you can set an array of goals, but one of the goals we had with this was to, really just present these topics and have something that when someone's done reading this issue, they can walk away feeling more informed, and then actually having access to some resources for if they want to get more involved. So the resources are a little more relevant to the United States, right? Because we had, and that's actually what I was going to move into next, that we actually had sponsors of this issue. Volume 1, we didn't have any association with brands. We funded the whole thing ourselves. And with this one, we had a combination of actual sponsors, and then we had some conservation partners. So Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and then National Forest Foundation, which is the nonprofit partner of the National Forest Service in the United States. So with them, they actually gave us access to their resources, their data, their surveys, in some cases their membership base. So that's something where if people wanted to learn more about forest management or public land awareness or activism, they could go to these websites and learn more about how to be involved or how to participate. So we definitely wanted to present more of those opportunities. On the brand side, this was sort of a model that we made up. We had Volume 1, and we know that we needed help. We needed a way to help fund this magazine without making it look like other magazines.
Like blatant advert.
Yeah, in a lot of cases you see advertisements in a magazine and they were submitted by the advertiser and it doesn't necessarily fit in with the look and feel of the book. And so what we did, we had 5 sponsors. Yeti was our biggest sponsor. Sitka. There's a company in Texas called Epic Bars, Epic Provisions, and they sort of made.
They're good.
It's amazing. Yeah, they sort of protein snacks, but organic.
Grass-fed
bison, venison, turkey, salmon, a bunch of stuff like that. Irish setter boots, which is a division of Red Wing boots, and then Chama chairs. So these were the 5 brands we had for this issue, and basically we kind of partnered with them, and we had these conversations behind the curtain, which is much more difficult to coordinate because we're talking with the marketing directors and we're talking about what they're trying to accomplish in the next 6 months, and we basically would find a way to position them next to stories that were relevant to their company's initiatives or conservation focus. And so they kind of acted as presenters of specific stories that help promote their ethos, and then we have product sort of worked into these stories. I mean, a lot of people use specific products anyways. I mean, when you guys come visit it in the United States, you'll see that there's Yetis everywhere.
Yeah.
And so that's not hard for us to just make sure that we're including some of that in the stories. And that was one of my main focuses with this one, was making sure that we integrated this stuff without it looking too heavy-handed.
So it was actually part rather than just an addition.
Yes, yeah. And so it took a lot of convincing for everyone to trust us that we knew what we were doing, because
it's different, right?
No one's really, well, there's variations that people have done, but not in the way we did it. And I'm not going to go into detail because that would spill the beans on our super secret model. But then Brad comes in on the digital side, and we have coordinated, online stories and product features on the website and homepage feature. We're promoting a film series. So, for instance, our chef feature in this issue is Chef Eduardo Garcia, and an amazing, inspiring guy. And if you haven't seen his documentary called Charged, you should definitely check it out.
It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. It's on iTunes. And
it's free on Amazon if you've got Prime.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. So Eduardo had released a film series with Yeti called Hungry Life.
Really good.
It's really good. Really good. And we just got lucky in the sense of the timing, right? With the release of these films, came out maybe 3 weeks before we released Volume 2. So we coordinated with Yeti, hey, we would love to help promote this film series through our channels as well. And so that became one of those things. So we're trying to sync up as much as we can with the contributors and folks we have involved with the issue. And we kind of say, okay, everybody dump their pockets out. What do we got, right? What projects do you have coming up? What films are you releasing? And then how can we help promote it? Because at the end of the day, the more people who see this type of quality work, whether it's Eduardo's film or it's one of your films or across the board, the better. So in that sense, that was a big difference between Volume 1 and Volume 2, was integrating a little bit of brands and
so it was more than just the paper you had in your hand.
Yeah. So, and those are longer partnerships. So it'll be over the course of 6 months that we release a lot of this stuff. And we're hoping that develops into sort of a long-term thing where we're saying, okay, well, let's talk about the next few issues, and then we're actually going out and producing films and releasing multiple stories and that kind of stuff. So that's a big difference, and I think that one of those stories in particular that I'm really proud of was there's a young woman named Erin Kiley who, she was not a hunter. She was a rancher and grew up in a combination of Virginia and was ranching out in California. And I don't remember exactly if she was actually vegetarian, but she definitely wasn't a hunter. And she got Volume 1 and was so inspired by it that she decided she wanted to learn how to hunt. So she went and signed up for this hunting course in Washington State and learned how to shoot a rifle and shoot a bow and learned about woodcraft, and they went on a turkey hunt, and it wasn't successful, but just that experience was really inspiring for her, and basically kind of, in her words, shattered her paradigm of hunting. She viewed it in another way. We presented it in the way that we had, and it changed her mind. So that's literally a direct representation of what we're trying to do with this book. And she ended up contacting us through a friend, Ed Robertson of the Mountain and Prairie podcast. And
great podcast.
Yeah, it is. That's great. And you should have him on here at some point.
In the works.
Good. So anyway, she ended up writing a piece for Volume 2. So she's in here and talks about how her new being able to approach hunting without the pretext from before, without the conceptions of what she thought it was, that this made her able to approach hunting on her own terms, and has now realized that her view of sustainable ranching is not all that different from hunting in terms of, rather than just thinking about one animal, you're thinking about the entire ecosystem and how you're a part of this ecosystem, and how the animal plays a part in the ecology and the rotation of the soil and the the spread of seeds and germination and all that kind of stuff. So, and she would say it much better than I could. So that's another person
to have on.
Yeah. But Epic, that's what they focus on, is this sort of holistic regenerative grazing and ranching practices. So we were able to connect those two. So they're already working on their own thing. And that's a perfect example of how we were able to pair a brand with a contributor who already think the same. They're doing the same type of thing. Perfect matchup. The story was a great example of something that we want to do, and everybody was happy. And so I think that's, I hope that it's that easy every time. But that's something I was really excited about because that's kind of what I had in mind when we came up with this. I was like, surely there's ways where we can find people who want to do stories that brands are hoping to do anyways. And it's basically like a grant, right? Here, go do this.
But more than that, that is a great example of one of the things you wanted to achieve with Modern Huntsman.
Absolutely.
Which is open the door.
Yeah.
And say, be involved.
Yeah.
And understand it at a level that you want to understand.
And it's great that people feel that, I mean, we see it on our Instagram and that people contacting us, but feel like they can contact you and speak to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and
instead of a massive brand where you go, I'm going to shoot them a message, but I'll never get anything back.
Go through HR.
Yeah, we're going to give them your email address for now. If they want to contact me, you can be the gatekeeper. Yeah. So that's something that we're going to do for Volume 3. We're going to open it up more broadly for submissions. We're in the process of putting a system in place where we could actually field this, because I get a lot of random emails, or we'll get them through our website, or I'll get an Instagram message, and it becomes hard to kind of keep track of everything and who I've talked to and what our conversation was, and that's great, right? That there's that level of interest, but it's quickly growing beyond my ability to communicate with everyone. So we're trying to put a system in place where we can handle that a little more efficiently. And because there's a lot of people, whether or not it's their story, they may know of something that's really, really interesting or valid for the next issue, and that's going to be a good way for us to kind of field some of that stuff. So, yeah, I think it's in this case we pretty much handpicked everyone for Volume 2. I mean, you and I kind of dreamed up your stories back, when I was here in May, and then obviously I wrote several, Charles wrote several, and we have a handful of returning contributors from Volume 1, but quite a few new people. So Volume 1 was 204 pages. This is 256, so it's quite a bit bigger.
It's noticeable even when you just pick it up.
And then we had, I think, 13 or 14 contributors in Volume 1. We have over 30 in this one. And some of that is also, some people wrote the story and there was a different photographer. So there's a few situations where there's 2 contributors for one story, but we also have quite a few more people involved, which was a lot of work. It was great, right? But that's a lot when I look at this thing, and it was only in the last week or two that I was able to pick this back up without contempt,
without shaking.
Yeah, it was rough. I had to distance myself. It was got down to the wire to produce it. So
talk to the challenges of being an editor and the front man of something like this, because most people won't understand what's involved in not only being the editor of a magazine, but being the editor of something like Modern Huntsman, which is, you analyze what goes in there to a level that I don't believe is really done anywhere else, not in the hunting space.
Yeah, I think that in the beginning, I was a total pain in the ass to Brad and Elliot, and I know that I'm definitely a pain in the ass to Katie, and she'll talk more about that later.
we should say that Katie is the designer, but also your girlfriend.
Yeah. So we work together and live together and create together, which is fantastic most of the times, but in certain cases, like the final production week of Modern Huntsman can be quite hard.
I'm just watching her face while you're talking.
Yeah. And so in terms of what I feel the stakes are here are very high, right? Because I think you both could attest that at least in the hunting space, and especially in modern media, you can't really take anything back. If you misstep,
there's consequences.
There's consequences. And so that's why I mentioned earlier, I don't see myself as a magazine editor or a photographer or a writer. I view myself as a chess player right now. I feel like I'm playing a massive long-term chess game, and I'm trying to move one piece at a time analyzing the board, adjusting to shifts in perception or horrible news headlines or, feedback or what other magazines are doing or what other magazines might be copying what we're doing, and trying to outflank all of them. So with this, we kind of sat down and we said, okay, what do we do with Volume 1? What do we like? What do we not like? What do we feel like should be better? Whether that's the message, the people, the design, the distribution, the brands that were involved, and then, how do we want to make that better, just in general? And then with the theme of Volume 2, with public land, we kind of sat down and said, okay, what are the issues here? Which of these do we feel qualified to take on? Which ones, what do we want to say? What do we want people to walk away with? And then if they want to learn more, where do they go to do it? And so I know that's a lot, but that's kind of where we started with this. And I got to give credit to Charles, because I think he's a great balance for me, right? Because we have different backgrounds, we have common interests, but totally different backgrounds. And so he kind of balances me out and vice versa. So when I have a strong belief on something, he'll say, well, you didn't think about this or what these people are going to think. So I think we come from different enough backgrounds that it helps us have a broader view of everything. So I wish that I had some sort of tracker for how many phone calls, emails, text messages. So I know for sure that in the month of September, I did over 3,500 emails.
No way.
Which is a lot.
That's a lot.
and that's not me physically typing 3,500, but that's in terms of threads and conversations and replies.
You still had to put your eyeballs on these,
But I did personally talk to every single contributor in this book about their story, what we wanted to do. In certain cases, multiple phone calls throughout the process, because everybody's sort of at a different level. Some people are very, experienced contributors and writers where, Byron, in your case, you turn in a story and there's very little editing, right?
I paid him to say that today.
and Jillian as well. Her stories are more long form poems.
Beautiful.
And so the editing, apart from maybe whether an apostrophe or should be there or not, I don't touch it. And then there's other people who are sort of working through this, right? They maybe this is their first long form story. So there was a few situations like that. And I really have I don't know if this is going to discredit me as an editor, but I don't have previous experience as a magazine editor, right? I've been a contributor, right? And I feel I'm basing a lot of this on how I feel the process should be better. Bad experiences I had with other magazines. And so I just, and Katie's gotten on to me about this. She's like, oh, well, you should be able to pass some of this off. And I think, in my opinion, why I feel as proud of this as I do is because I've personally had a part in every step along the way. And I want the experience to be personal. I want the contributors to feel like they're a part of it rather than just somebody who, sent in some photos and we're like, yeah, thank you very much. We'll never speak again.
Well, as someone who's sent in a lot of articles to different publications around the world over the last decade, I can't think of another case where there is so much interaction with the person behind it, with the editor, where you're actually getting proper feedback constructively to say, you know what, I think the reader would really enjoy it if you could add one more paragraph here just to expand on this point that you've made. And I don't think I've ever had that before. And that's great.
It's also not very often that Byron puts in an article, quite often the pictures are mine as well, that the article comes out and you're actually particularly happy with it. You look at it and the article's fine because you've written it, but the way it's been laid out, you go, they've kind of butchered my work in a way.
Especially when you think you've given nice photos, whereas we flick through these ones.
You flick through that. I mean, there's a few. Don't get me wrong. There's a few that we've worked with in Germany and they do a really good job. There is a few around the world, but on the whole, they end up butchering the work.
It's not the normality,
or they don't credit photographers, which happens all the time with our work.
Yeah.
Or you got to get out a damn magnifying glass to
see
the
it.
photo credit, and it's sideways on the spine.
Or the main part of the picture, which we had one the other day, a great picture, and they'd put the actual focus of the picture in the spine, so you actually lost the entire thing. So you're like, well, what are you doing?
What are you looking at? It was
Yeah,
like like snowy scene.
It was a person, so there was only one person in the scene, and they put the person in the scene, and the rest of it was just a snowy landscape. So it just looked like a landscape.
And Katie walked out of the room, but working with her on this has actually changed my photography a little bit.
Yeah,
so
you were saying
you'll notice yesterday we were on an estate here in Scotland, and I remember taking the picture I would normally take, and then I thought to myself, Katie would like this image, but she would want it to be a double-page spread, so I should probably put the subject a little further to the left and give her some blank space.
Actually, the last few shoots I've done, I've been putting a lot of my focus on exactly the same thing as you, is that this can be used here. So I've been putting stuff much further to the left or the right-hand side. Typically, it's the left.
Yeah. And so I think that we got to find a balance, right? Because, or if there was a way to take some of the editing off my plate in terms of the actual proofreading and that sort of stuff. So we're working on ways to make that more efficient. In no way do I want to become removed from the process. I think that if we are going to open it up for submissions, in a perfect world, there's somebody who understands my preference or my sort of standard, and when they get a story, they'd be able to know whether or not it's something that I would be interested in, and sort of screen some of those.
It's like a pre-filter for
a little bit. That would be nice, because I don't like being on the computer, and I prefer to, if I could talk to everyone face to face, great. But I do prefer to be on the phone. So we had a lot of phone calls about a lot of this stuff. But because I was so involved in the process, it was a lot of work with that many people. So I think that, we absolutely wanted Volume 2 to be a clear step up from Volume 1. I don't know if
we hear what you're saying, Tyler, and we'll fly out and help you for
Please,
a month.
Come stay in Montana. Yeah.
That's what you're actually saying to
Yes.
us. I need help, and you guys need to come over and just stay with me
come and hunt in Montana
for a month, and you guys can proofread some stuff.
So I think that we're going to have to find a balance, because we can't just keep upping the bar massively every time.
No.
Right. So I think with Volume 3, what we've kind of decided, I like this size. This feels
really nice,
very nice,
balanced, and
in terms of page count, the 250 pages is good. I think I would prefer to have fewer people, which isn't so much about the amount of contributors, more so as we felt like we were having to cut things short. There were so many amazing photos, and we had to cut a few stories, and we literally we did an initial walkthrough of the layout and kind of allotted spreads to people, and we got to the end and we were like, whoa, that just went like that. We just, all 256 pages are spoken for, so we had to kind of go backwards and adjust things, and where we'd initially had a lot of double page openers, we had to kind of condense some of those into embedding the photos within the text, and so I think it would be good to have more room to let everybody's work breathe, and let more photography, just lots more pages of just photography.
Visual,
yeah. I mean, I think you guys can agree, there's a ton in this book.
There is, yeah.
The standard of photography is unbelievable.
When you pick that up, that's the first thing everyone comments, is the photography. So if you can showcase it even more, then it's surely only a good thing. Without the detriment of the stories.
We feel incredibly privileged that our photography can meet the standard of the publication, because it is so high. I don't know of another one in this space that has such a high standard for photography.
Well, thank you. And, and it's really surreal to be sitting here holding this, and some of the messages we're getting now, and the emails from people who are interested in submitting work, to think that it's only been a year, and
you've come so far.
I knew that we would get there. Right, because I just had no doubt in my mind that this was the path we were on. This is where we were going to get eventually. Not to say that we're resting on our laurels, but the reception to this has been amazing, and we've certainly made our statement clear, and I think people understand what we're trying to do, and a lot of people want to help or be a part of it. And so, and one of the major wins, in my opinion, is the fact that we have one of Chris Burkhart's images on the cover of a hunting magazine.
It's amazing.
It's an incredible image, and you have to really look at it to try and work out what it is that you're looking at.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't actually seen the book, the cover is one of Chris Burkhart's aerial photos of an Icelandic river. A glacial river in Iceland. So if you look on the cover, when I was initially editing this image, there's little white specks, and I thought, come on, Chris, you got dust spots on your sensor?
And I haven't actually. Let me.
Yeah, and then I
didn't
zoomed in.
this.
Those are little pieces of glacier that haven't quite melted yet.
No way.
So there's a couple little white spots on the cover.
Yeah.
So
I didn't notice that.
The yellow, from what I understand, is sort of the sediment and the sand that's sort of been under the glacier, and then these, the bluish green is the water melting and flowing down. So Charles was, he's worked on several projects with Chris, and they're good friends. And so Charles approached him about being a guest editor. And I had, little expectation, because Chris is obviously approached by massive brands and organizations all over the world. And I was really surprised to hear that he was interested in being a part of it. And so, we've got a great interview in here with him that Charles did, talking about his sort of love and appreciation for public land, and then, sort of the challenges that we face with it, and then why he feels it's important that people need to come together to sort of make sure that it stays the way it is, or that things continue to improve. And I believe, I don't know the current status on this, but I believe he was working with the Icelandic government on the creation of a park system and public land.
Okay.
And I think that, maybe that's something you guys could talk to him at some point, or with
sure.
Charles. But I think that, somebody who's not only not a hunter, but kind of one of the major recognizable faces of the outdoor industry, agreed to come be a part of a hunting magazine because he believed that the mission was more important than, the categorization. So,
Now, Tyler, I'm not going to stop the podcast, but I need to redress you.
Yep.
Because your collar keeps rubbing the microphone.
Oh.
I don't want people
Yep.
to keep. Oh, now I just knocked it, but that'll be fine. There we go. Let's undo this a little bit.
Okay.
There we go. I'm undressing you
Yeah.
on the podcast. There we go. Much better.
I wondered about that.
I mean, the front cover, it's not it's an environmental picture.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It's not a hunting picture.
No.
And yet it's a hunting. The core of the publication has a hunting thread, hunting, conservation, environmental thread through it, and that is really refreshing.
Yeah.
Because how many hunting-based publications do you see that do not either have a quarry species or somebody holding a gun and hunting it?
Well, and I remember specifically getting, I don't know if confronted is the right word, but somebody that I know said to me, hey, I just saw the image when we first announced the cover. I got a message that said, hey, I saw the cover image, but what does that have to do with hunting? I don't get it. And I said, well, it has nothing to do with hunting, and that's the point. Because we don't want this magazine, we don't want somebody to look at this magazine and see an image on the cover that immediately makes their mind up about something, right? We don't want this magazine cover to look like any other hunting magazine with, and not to say that we couldn't have an image of, a hunted animal or a rifle or something like that, but it's the way that it's presented.
Yeah.
It has to be something that is inviting, and that in the same way that I said that Erin Kiley, it allowed her to enter hunting on her own terms. We want that to be the same thing here. We want people to be able to be comfortable to enter into the conversation without feeling, something being pushed in their face or.
Well, it's intriguing.
Yeah.
I can very well see people who are open-minded enough to pick up something like that, putting their hand on the shelf and taking it off, but they would maybe feel uncomfortable if it's, a dog with a pheasant in its mouth, which is very clearly aimed at one type of person. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those publications still need to exist, but what you're trying to achieve here is something different.
Well, and I'd also like to note that when you open the cover, the first page in the magazine is one of y'all's photographs, and it has a quote from Yvon Chouinard, the CEO and founder of Patagonia.
Oh, it is one of our photographs.
No.
You guys didn't know that. And
It is. That's Joseph.
Yep.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
There we go.
I didn't notice it the
Yeah,
first time.
so you guys are the opener of the book, and we have a quote in here that says, and we actually got permission from Patagonia, so we got in touch with their, worldwide global communications director, and there was some, Yvonne had been on some podcasts, I think with BHA, and we were given permission to pull quotes from that.
Great.
And then we sent the ones we were interested in, and they gave us full approval to print them. And so it says, I don't know of any hunters that only hunt anymore. They're all snowboarders and skiers and fishermen. It's the same thing with climbers too, and it's all dependent on having wild places. So, that's kind of the direction we want to move, right? And it would be amazing to do work with Patagonia at some point.
Yeah, great brand.
And they have kind of increased their language about that. Yvonne's been very outspoken. He's been doing events with BHA, and so who knows? But it's certainly a good sign, and that I think that helps set the tone for the book, because it's
really
very
does, yeah.
much the theme of this.
I actually read that quote when you handed me the book for the first time, and I didn't realize that was our photo underneath it, because I didn't look at the bottom. I was so busy reading it. I thought it was actually an aerial photo looking down on something. And now that you pointed out to me, there's
the
Joseph.
bottom right corner, and it's interesting because you can see it's a very grand scale, and the human is very small in the bottom corner of the photo, and all you can really see is it looks like a hiking pole in his hand. Yeah. So even
it was a hiking. It was an ice axe.
Yep.
That's
so you don't. You were on a hunt, but in this image, it's not hunting specific, and that's what. We have plenty of hunting specific images in here, but we were very strategic with the balance of everything, and then the order. And Brad Christian, who was another guest editor of mine, and he's the brand director of Sitka. He was very, very helpful towards the end. I came in with, it was the first printed proof, and he looked through it, and he made some incredible suggestions on where he felt like we were missing more images of traditional hunting, a few more wildlife photos, and then reordering some images that were more specific to public lands, and we had quite a few horse images in this. And so it was kind of a last minute thing, but that's why we have guest editors is
just to help make
additional
it better.
Perspective that we wouldn't otherwise think about. And, Brad has some amazing contacts with photographers and other brands and things like that.
Very good photographer himself, too.
Yes, he is. And so he's got a piece in here too. And so that, that was just another example of everybody kind of coming together under common cause and just trying to make this thing as good as it could possibly be. So
when I flicked through the article in New Zealand that I wrote, I was surprised and happy at the same time that the picture of me with the tar made the cut, and I wasn't sure whether it would, not for any other reason than because of the kind of imagery that you have.
It was actually a tricky picture to edit.
Oh, it was so dark.
Because it was so dark.
Yeah.
And I saw that, I thought, it really works, but I kind of, although we submitted it, I didn't really expect it to make the cut. But obviously that's your job to try and pick what you think tells the story.
And I got to give credit to Brad there, and while he didn't specifically say you need to use this picture, this is why I came back and put this picture in, because of what he said. He said, I feel like we need to have a few more images of animals that were taken. And of course, almost all of them that were submitted were in a respectful way, but so I kind of went back through, and to be honest, there's not a ton of images or not a lot of the stories in this book are focused on a specific hunt.
Even that one's only kind of mentions it in passing.
It mentions it in context of the larger issue. And so this was, of the entire book, this was the one that made the most relevance, and thankfully that there were images that, did what he was hoping to come
and I actually don't even have a rifle in that either. I've got an ice axe.
Yeah, you do.
Just to make it clear, he didn't kill it with an
No,
ice axe.
didn't.
Yeah, that's. But it was an amazing story about the plight of the Himalayan tar in New Zealand, and I think that it's a great image, and I'm glad that we went back and had it in, because otherwise it wouldn't have even shown the animal. You know, I think not a lot of people know what a tar is.
No, true.
So
I'm also the picture that was taken in the car made the cut.
Yeah. I love that picture, but it was taken through the windscreen of a car.
Yeah, well, Katie's no longer here. She can talk more about that. But it's interesting, our process, too. And this wasn't planned, but just
she's coming back in.
Come on in. I guess you can edit that part out.
No, we're just going to leave it in.
Leave it in.
So I think that it's interesting when we do this that she has an awareness of the themes because I've been talking about them for months, and she's
driving her nuts, probably
taking phone calls in the car about them, and so she has an idea, but she hadn't read through all the stories before she did the layout. So in this situation, I give her a Dropbox folder, of images, of selects, and I remember her giving me crap about it. She's like, 25 images is not selects. I was like, I need to give you some variety to choose from. But anyway, so I let her go through unbridled and pick the images that she likes from a design perspective. And then I kind of go through and do a review and say, okay, well, because this story specifically mentions this or that, I think we need to sub this one for this image. But for the most part, I would say that 75 to 85% of this book, she just went through and picked everything without my input. And then I went in and sort of rearranged some things according to the subject and theme. But she loved your car picture. So, yeah.
Cool. As she's shaking her head up and down. Are you able to tell us what Volume 3 is going to be about?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, good. I mean, obviously we know because we've been talking about it. I wasn't sure if it was public information.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's going to be about wildlife management, which is a pretty broad topic. But this was something that Simon and I...
So I'm just going to press pause on you for a second because you've mentioned Simon before. Mm-hmm. Simon Roosevelt, grandson of Teddy Roosevelt.
I don't know.
Or is he
descendant of? Yeah,
related,
I don't know if he's great-great-grandson but he's descendant from
the
Teddy
famous
Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Sorry, just for context.
He's the only, from what I understand, he's the only Roosevelt since TR who has sort of taken up the hunting and conservation banner. Mm-hmm. And he isn't, he's kind of a behind-the-scenes person, but he has a lot of input into conservation and wildlife and ethics.
Amazing person to
have. In the
United
United States, yeah. And so he was in Texas back in the spring, and we had visited this, it's called Fossil Rim, and it's an area where they call them, I think it's species insurance breeding programs, where they, breed fringe-eared oryx and different species that have lost their native range or are threatened in other parts of the world. So they breed these and then they reintroduce them. And we were just discussing that. And then especially in Texas, there's a massive wild hog problem, right? And that's a wildlife management situation where it affects hunters and they cause millions of dollars of damage to farms in Texas every year. So it's such a broad topic, whether it's hunting related or it's zoology related, or specifically in Africa, conflict between wildlife and native villagers, right? So it's such a broad topic, but it allows us to discuss some very controversial stuff. And, elephant conflict, grizzly bears, wolves. Here in the UK, you've got your own topics you want to talk about. So that's what Volume 3 is slated for, which is part of why I was here. We don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, we can talk about it. So, you can give an insight into one of the articles that you're going to be doing, which is what we were up in the rain and miserable mist yesterday.
Yeah, I'd like to say that's the only reason I came to Scotland, but
you can see where you were hunting. The glen is just up there.
Yeah.
Well, in the mist.
Sure.
Apparently.
Obviously, I just wanted to spend more time here and
have a couple of days off as well.
Get myself a proper tweed hunting hat, which I managed to do.
Which you're sporting right now.
I am. Yeah, even though the headphones don't really fit over it.
Looks are important.
Yeah, well, who knows? Somebody could be doing an Instagram story.
Katie, hint.
Yeah, hint. And I just, last time I was here, we were on the Glen Ogle estate, and I got to see some of the red grouse management, which was super fascinating to me, the amount of work that goes into improving the habitat for this one bird. But especially evidenced by, you guys talking about how the heather moorland is rarer than the rainforest, that there's less heather moorland left than there is rainforest. But people
and most of it's here
love the rainforest, but don't necessarily know as much about the moorland here, the moorland management.
There's no monkeys, that's why.
No charismatic megafauna, I believe is what you're looking for. So
whose phrase is
that's
that?
Charles.
That's Charles.
Yeah.
I could have guessed.
Yeah. So, and for me, there's something so sort of mystical and majestic about the red stag, right? And you always
the monarch of
yeah,
the
and we have some of y'all's photos in here of the traditional ponies on the hill with the stag and the mist and the tweeds, and I said I need to see what this is all about, and at the same time realized how much of a sort of a hot topic it is in your country, with the amount of work that these gamekeepers exhibit and go through to manage these deer populations. And it's also relevant to this current issue of public versus private land, because these are private estates, but they spend a lot of money to do this, and a lot of times are operate at a loss. And so yesterday I was able to actually kind of experience this for myself, and we spoke with one of the young gamekeepers there who knew he was so award-winning.
Yeah,
yeah.
He didn't mention. I had told you, I'd given you the heads up, and then we did the interview with him, and he never mentioned it, and I had to pick him up because he was too modest to talk about it.
Yeah, he had won 4 or 5 awards as a young gamekeeper in Scotland, and I think it was really, really interesting to see what his job entails and the amount of effort they go through to ensure the health of this herd. And it's, I think what was really interesting to me was that a lot of people associate these, they see the photos from this and they say, oh, that looks, only for the rich and famous kind of thing, and it's this big trophy hunt. But at the end of the day, their main focus and their only interest in that whole operation is to protect the well-being of the herd. And so every decision they make is not about what the client wants or how much money they may or may not have paid. It's about their personal decision on the well-being of the ecosystem and the individual animal.
And that's how they're selecting it.
Absolutely. And I think that was really, really interesting to hear about.
Because Callum was saying to you that you, as a client, you can't phone up and say, I want to shoot a trophy 12-point or 14-point stag.
Yeah.
Because they'll just say to you, sorry, we don't do that here.
Go to New Zealand.
Maybe, yeah. That is not what we do. You may very well shoot something like that, but when we go up on the hill, and you're going to read about this in Tyler's article, I'm sure, because Callum went into quite a lot of detail about what their selection process is and how it works. But that is not their focus.
Yeah.
Their focus is not how big is the rack that we can stick on the wall. It is, can we find the right animal for the well-being and longevity of the herd? Mm-hmm. And that's about body size and survival through winters, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's quite brilliant, actually, because basically they're, in a comedic way, they're getting, clients to pay to do their job in a sense, which is, but so when you're paying to go on one of these hunts, you're paying for the privilege to be part of the history of this operation and the management of this species, which, and something that was really interesting to me is that the government doesn't really do population censuses in the way that the U.S. government would, do surveys and say, okay, there's this many animals, and then they issue this number of permits or tags. That it's the responsibility of the gamekeepers to manage, or to sort of survey the herds and how many there are, and then from that they sort of base a percentage of the take on that.
Exactly.
So not only are they the guide, but they're also sort of the wildlife researcher as well. So whereas there's a disconnect in the United States, some guides may not have access to that information, but if you've got your tag, you know that you're legal. You can go out and you can hunt.
Because someone else has done it for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this case, they're actually much more invested and aware of the current state of that, herd of animals, which I think is really honorable.
And many of them, not all the keepers do it, because some of them are at different stages in the training for it, but increasingly as we go forward into the future, the vast majority of stalkers in those upland areas will be doing the habitat assessment plots themselves. We're just in the process of helping with the revamp of the film for the training of it. So they will have 30, 40 plots around the estate, which they have to monitor every year, and there's a very regimented system, ecological system for working out browsing pressure to help determine whether they're getting it right. They are involved in that. It's not outside people coming in to do it, although that does happen to check it. they're involved in it on the ground and they're being trained to do it.
Yeah. Well, and then it was interesting to hear about the grouse as well, and how they're so tuned in to the breeding success of the grouse. And they, Callum was telling us about how there was a hard winter, and the grouse chicks didn't do very well, and so the numbers were down, and so they, didn't do as many hunts, and specifically, and that's a tough decision for them, because financially that's bringing in far less money, but the health and success of the grouse population is more important than that. And that's where the private ownership, I feel like, should be commended, because they're making a decision that's immediately affecting the amount of money coming in, and they're going to take that loss because they're stewards of this land and of that wildlife.
And it's the long-term
Yeah.
survival that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So, your hunt yesterday, tell me about it. Did you enjoy it?
I did. Yeah.
Because we weren't expecting, actually, when I
No.
arranged this, I wasn't expecting for us to actually be able to hunt, but I arranged for us to go up so that you could speak to the keepers, do
Sure.
the interviews, take the pictures, and then the night before I was just firming up the times, and the head keeper, Gary, very kindly said, "You guys want to hunt?" I said, "Well, I don't need to, but I'm sure Tyler won't object, so I'll bring a rifle."
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I didn't expect it either. And in fact, when
Did you tip everyone when you were there?
I smiled and waved to everyone. So yeah, I mean, when you first told me, I was like, yeah, I'd love to, but I really need to make sure I get good photos. And then we got there, and I saw the area we were in. I was like, okay, this is not going to be a problem to get good photos. And I think that I might be a little spoiled, because from what I gather, our stalking experience was rather.
It was a lot quicker than it can be.
Yeah.
We just got lucky. They were low down, probably because of the weather. They were quite low down on the hill.
Yeah. So, we stalked up through, this, I don't even know what that is. I mean, it felt like a bog. But
That's basically most of Scotland.
That's just our hill.
yeah, I mean, these amazing waterfalls and rocks with moss and all these colorful, purples and greens and beautiful colors. And it was raining the entire time, very misty and foggy, so you couldn't really see the tops of the mountains. And, we stalked up, it took 30, 45 minutes. But it's cool, because the tradition of the Scottish stalking is that, the guide per se is sort of the gatekeeper, and so you crawl right behind him, and he kind of makes all the decisions.
And he had that discussion with you before we started, didn't he?
Yeah. And so we crawled up to this rock, and basically at this point, they're managing the herd. So they've determined that they needed to take, what did he say, 500?
For the entire estate.
For the entire estate,
females, yeah.
They needed to cull 100 stags, so 100 males and 500 females. And so, in between all the gamekeepers on the estate, they all have sort of an allotment.
Yeah,
that
different beats.
They're responsible for a specific area of land, and in that area, they have to make sure that they reach these numbers, so that areas don't get overgrazed, or that sickness and weakness don't move in, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of what this hunt was about, was helping them do their job. And so for me to get to experience this and do this, so we stalked up on a hind, on a female, and I think I was about 180 yards away, and I was really nervous. Just I've never gotten to do it before, and anyways, made a good shot, and thankfully, she didn't run very far, but because of the mist and the fog, it took us a while to find her.
Yeah.
But it was pretty amazing to walk up, and he wasn't wearing his tweeds, because he didn't know that we were doing a fancy photo shoot.
Yeah.
Normally, they would be wearing their estate.
He had
tweeds.
his tweed hat on, but that was it. It was also a really miserable day.
And I don't know if tweeds are fully waterproof.
Not really.
They eventually soak through.
Yeah. So, but just to have him with his cap on, and what is that stick called?
A crook.
A crook. Yeah, he had his crook and the the gun slung over his back, and it was such a surreal moment, because I've seen so many photos of that, and to know that I was there doing that, and I was trying to experience it and take it in, but at the same time, like, this just looks too amazing.
It's hard when you kind of feel like because you had a job to do, because you're trying to capture it to appreciate it at the same time. I actually wrote a paragraph about that at the start of one of the articles in this issue.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is really hard just to appreciate the experience for what it is when you're trying to capture pictures.
And so, we sort of walked up, and I know it's tradition in Scotland that for the first red stag that you are blooded, where the blood is put on your face, and he kind of had this smile on his face, and he looked over at Byron, and he goes, "What kind of blooding should he get?" And Byron was like, "Make sure it's a gentleman's blooding." And so I believe they took it easy on me. Yeah. But it was pretty cool to see, and then obviously they have the traditional pony there, so we took the deer off the hill on the back of the pony on the saddle, and then we took it back to the larder, or sort of the
chiller,
cooler, the
States,
meat storage, and weighed it, and they log it into their book, and we tagged it. And while we were hoping to take it home to eat for Thanksgiving, we're going to go back today and pick it up. So Byron and Daryl will have it for their friends and family, and then you were also picking one up for
another friend.
Another friend. So
which we selected him.
Yeah, this all sort of goes into the food chain, and various people can just sort of purchase that in the same way you'd purchase it from a butcher. So it's kind
of
a
little bit more work involved.
Sure, full circle. But yeah, it was really an honor to participate in that, and the photos I got are. It's going to be really hard to hold on to these photos until the
your
next
short
issue.
list to Katie's going to be like 50 this time.
Man.
Now we put up a picture a few weeks ago now on Instagram, and it was actually of one of the gamekeepers on that estate wearing their tweed, and we were basically saying, this is what they wear traditionally here. And we had someone from your country, United States of America, saying, "Why do you wear that stupid getup?" And someone else from here said, "You realize tweed is the original camouflage. That's what it is." Now you've been here, you can obviously Callum wasn't wearing a full tweed, but he had tweed caps on. But his tweed cap would have been the estate's tweed.
Yeah. It was,
So you can probably appreciate how it actually does match the environment that it's in.
Well, but
it's funny that you bring it up because you weren't there yesterday, and I mentioned that when we were on the hill.
Yeah. So, but the jacket he was wearing was a greenish color that literally was the exact color of the surrounding landscape. And so, yeah, I see how, and then how I was wearing a green that was a little bit darker, and how that wouldn't necessarily, it would stick out, which is interesting, that it's all natural earth tones, and
no one wears like proper camouflage as such.
It would stick out
because when me and Byron go out, it's normally kind of like these kind of solid color blocks, but it's the same color as the terrain.
Yeah, I mean it was. I mean I wear lots of wool and tweed anyways, which never worked in Texas because it was too hot. Now that we live in Montana, it's much easier to wear. But no, that was something for me to see it in action, that it has application. And then someone else I was speaking to in England recently, someone had asked him a similar question about why did people start dressing all fancy for these shoots? And he said that he had heard that in the origination of it that was a way to show respect to the landowner. If they were allowing you to hunt on their estate, that you would dress smart as a sign of respect to the landowner. So they would show up to these shoots, wearing nice clothes as a sign of respect to the person who's allowed them access to the ground, which I think was kind of cool. But no, big fan of tweed. And I
mean, the granite. There's so much granite up there that the grey of that particular tweed, the Dalhousie Invermark tweed. When he put his hat down on because you shot off his hat, it was just blended perfectly into the granite stone.
Yep, I thought that was a pretty cool photo of him sitting there with his tweed hat protecting your rifle from getting scratched, but it all kind of blended in. Could not have been more Scottish.
He's a proper gent. He even asked. He said, "Do you mind if we shoot?" Because I took my nice rifle with the wooden stock. Do you mind if we shoot the rifle off the rock? But I'll put my hat down.
Yeah.
You even check. But that's how stalkers are here.
Sure.
That's their job. As he was explaining to you, it is to help the person who's coming to enjoy the day enjoy it to the maximum potential that they can, and help them in their job.
Yeah.
And you really do get that feeling. They're all a great bunch of guys up there. I wanted to ask you about the just rewind on the blooding. Because I've been picked up for this before by people, even actually my cousin who does actually hunt, and we've had discussions about the process of blooding, which is done in many countries around the world to a greater or lesser extent, and whether that was or is disrespectful in any way. What's your kind of take on it?
I've seen it before, in other places too, and that's not the first time that that's happened, but in this context, I think that it's a tradition, right? And whether or not, I don't know, I just feel like it's important for people to have respect for other traditions, whether they're a part of them or not, right? And it's all based on where's the scale there? Because there's some practices in maybe South American cultures that might seem barbaric or even violent, right? And African tribes too. Somehow some of these young boys, when they hold them down and they're circumcised in front of their entire village while they're screaming and that kind of thing. That's kind of intense, right?
Different end of the scale,
right? But that's part of their culture and that's part of their tradition, and it means something symbolically to them. And in the same way, this is representing a symbolic sort of, I don't know if that's
so
a
end of the
hunt, rite of passage, whatever you want to call it. And so again,
but it's not I don't see it as disrespectful in any way.
No.
It's not disrespectful to the animal that's died. It is actually done as a mark of respect.
Well, and if anything, it makes you take a little more ownership of what has just happened. I mean, the term "you have blood on your hands." Well, in this case, I had blood on my face, and I certainly would take responsibility for that, anyways. But I think that it's an interesting symbolism there, and I could see in the same way that people get upset by trophy photos or grip and grins they see online that are out of context. I think that someone seeing a photo out of context, I could see how they might be offended by that. Mm-hmm. But that also might just be an individual case of someone being closed-minded versus wanting to understand why that's there, right? So to me, it would be important for someone to at least want to understand, right?
Why? How did you get to that
right.
point?
And then if at that point they then decide, okay, well, I understand why you did that, and I still disagree with it, fine, right? Mm-hmm. We all have the right to disagree. But how far do you need to take that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, just because you disagree with something, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer. I wasn't expecting a perfectly neat bow tied up answer to it, because I don't even think even though I've thought about it, I don't think I can necessarily answer it myself. But it is, I'd say it's part of the celebration of doing a hunt successfully for somebody the first time of that species, which is part of the tradition and heritage here, and is no way intended to be disrespectful to the animals that you've hunted. Quite the opposite, in fact.
Sure.
And I think that there's probably a spectrum of how you can do it, but I think it's done very tastefully.
I agree. And
because I asked him to be a gentleman about it.
Yeah. And we got a great photo.
Yeah, we do.
Of you and I on the hill, which we both turned into Thanksgiving posts.
Yes.
We decided to have a Scottish Thanksgiving this year.
And we thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great evening.
Did. Yeah, it was. It was a lot
some
of food.
Fantastic recipes from Katie.
It was. And it was funny because, your parents were asking, well, what is Thanksgiving all about? You guys need to teach us about this. We had to kind of think about that for ourselves. And, we know what the origin of the holiday was, but...
It's watching football.
At the end of the day, it's about eating a bunch of food and just being around people that you enjoy company with. So we certainly did that. And it was, this would normally be sort of a Christmas meal for you guys.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
And I think it was you who said it at some point. You're like, oh, this is how I feel after a Christmas meal. I'm like, no,
it was exactly last night.
That's pretty much it.
I don't want to do anything. I just feel like a slob now.
We were all slouching on the couch, drinking dessert wine and enjoying the fire, and everyone just sort of dozed off to sleep, which is what it's supposed to be. So,
you're going to be at shows in the coming months, or if people are there, might they be able to bump into you?
I hope so. I'll be at Dallas Safari Club for sure. I'm not sure about SCI. I will be at SHOT Show as well. Okay. So those are the only two I know for sure.
Any shows in the UK maybe?
I don't know about the UK, but I think I'll probably be at IWA in Germany.
Mm-hmm. March, yep.
But other than that, I don't have current plans. But hopefully we'll be hosting.
Are you going to Airbnb it with us if you're coming to IWA?
Probably.
That's a good plan, actually.
That's a good plan. I think if you're coming, it would make sense if we all stay together.
I agree. Yeah. And then hopefully we're hosting you guys in the United States pretty soon.
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
to get to the epicenter, which
we
is
gotta be there.
Bozeman, Montana.
Yeah.
And we've got to be there for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we're allowed in the country, we'll stay.
We'll ask Trump nicely.
Yeah. Well, we could have quite the lineup of podcast subjects for you in Bozeman, Montana.
We're excited about coming
Yeah.
over.
So,
And you are going to experience rugby in Scotland for the first time.
yeah, tomorrow we're going to the Scotland-Argentina game, which will be
24 hours from now, we're going to be in the stadium.
in Edinburgh. I'm really excited about. Normally, Katie and I would be watching, American football, but this time we'll be watching.
Now you're going to
rugby.
watch a real sport.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, Tyler, it's been awesome to have you on again. It's been great to host you the last couple of days. I'm looking forward. We're going to hopefully go and shoot for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Just sort of a rough kick around, see if there's anything that we can flush up and add to our list of game in the freezer, and hopefully get Katie her first shot, which
Absolutely.
would be excellent. And then when we come back, we're going to be doing an interview with a far more important person to
I
do with the
agree.
publication, which is the designer
The
herself.
real talent behind Modern Huntsman. Yeah.
Thanks very much, and we hope to speak to you again on the podcast soon.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks for listening to the show. Join us again in 2 weeks' time. I don't think there will be another show in between now, unless
We've done quite a few extra shows
Yeah, there's
recently,
been
but
quite a few.
I think it'll be a 2-week break, and then we will be we're going to be having a short break between Christmas and New Year, because we know everybody's normally filling their bellies and busy doing other things.
Yeah, people don't have time to listen to us.
But on the next show, we'll tell you when the last podcast is going out for 2018, and when you can expect the first podcast ready for your commute back to the job that you love in early January.
Yep, lots of exciting things happening in the new year. We've got lots of plans, hopefully with the podcast and everything else going into the future. Don't forget to leave us a review, please. Even if you don't even want to leave us a review on iTunes, on the Apple app, all you need to do is on the show, scroll down to the bottom, and there is a little thing with stars on it, and tap the 5-star. Even if you don't want to type anything, just give it a rating.
Because it makes a big difference for people finding it and being recommended.
It does indeed. So yeah, do that for us, and also you can also leave a review on Facebook and any of the other apps. I think you can also leave reviews on. You can't leave reviews on Spotify, but that's okay.
I wonder if they'll change that for podcasts.
I'm not sure. I think just the more people that listen to it, the higher up its rankings it goes. Don't forget, you can find out all information you need about us and also our shop on www.thepacebrothers.com. Find us on Instagram, pace_brothers. And if you are listening to the show for the first time and you're still finding your feet on the best way to listen to the show, it's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher, it's also on Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and more recently it is on the Amazon Alexa app. So all you need to say is, Alexa, play the Pace Brothers Into the Wilderness podcast, and it should just say playing from TuneIn Radio, and then start playing, in theory.
Pretty awesome, huh?
Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
We love to hear from you. We've had a lot of contact from listeners off the back of the fish farming podcast. It's really animated people. I've had one book sent to me that was written on the subject, so thank you very much to the chap who sent the book. And more emails than I can count. People really, really engaged by the subject and actually asking us to cover more podcasts on topics like that. So we'll be bringing that in the new year.